Year 7 with Cameron, he met his destined Omega. Everyone said I was the lucky one, loved by an alpha who could restrain his instincts. Cameron thought the same. He used to say, "So what if Bennett's a beta? He's the only one I love." But there are always exceptions. He told me, "Still, I need a child." He pulled the young Omega close and teased. "You're young and fertile. I guess I can accept that." 7 years of marriage. It only took me 7 days to detach myself. The day I left, the weather was beautiful. So was my mood. Just like always, I helped Cameron with his tie. Smiled as I saw him out the door. But this time, I didn't say, "Come home soon." 1. The day before Cameron's rut ended, I didn't wait quietly at home. I snuck off to his private club. Cameron is a top-tier alpha. He always came here during rut to tough it out. He was afraid he'd hurt me. I was grateful he cared that much, but I also worried about his health. I tried hard to accept every part of him. This time, I came a day early to share some good news. The suite was empty, the bed a mess. Sheets and blankets soft, slick, and sticky. I wasn't surprised. Alphas during rut are full of energy. They need release. A cleaning lady I didn't recognize pointed me in the right direction. "Are you one of the owner's friends? They're partying upstairs." The top floor was filled with clinking glasses and dim, sultry lighting. I stood in the shadow near the entrance, feeling a bit lost. I recognized most of them. Cameron's friends. Some I didn't know. Including the quiet, pretty boy who stayed close by Cameron's side. He looked young, probably still in college. Then came a sudden wave of scents. Not alcohol or cologne. But unfamiliar pheromones. Sweet, heady, aggressive. They came and went, close 1 second, far the next. I couldn't tell which one belonged to Cameron. It was overwhelming. I wasn't used to it. I raised my hand to cover my nose and mouth. Someone teased Cameron. "Cameron, you're 30 and just met your fated Omega. What's that like?" Another chimed in. "You used to tough it out for 3 whole days. This time it's been 24 hours of non-stop fun. Looks like you're hooked." Someone else argued. "Nah, Cameron's loyal. He only likes that average beta back home." The tone was playful, the expressions even more so. Cameron raised an eyebrow, swirled his wine, and downed it in one gulp. Then tossed the empty glass at the guy who spoke. Casually said, "Don't talk nonsense." I stepped back, leaning silently against the wall. I stared at the messy, glowing lights spilling out of the doorway. Refusing to look at Cameron's face. He seemed to be in a great mood, much more talkative than usual. "So what if Bennett's a beta? He's the only one I love." The words rang in my ears, making them itch. Like ants crawling. Cameron continued. "Sure, an Omega makes rut easier and faster to deal with. But that's all it is. Fated bond or not, who cares? The only reason I'm keeping him around is because I'm 30 now, and I need a kid. My baby just can't give me one." Hidden in the shadows, I turned my head and peeked at him from the corner of my eye. He pulled the sweet-faced Omega with wide eyes and soft cheeks into his arms. Patted his face and said, "You're young and fertile. I guess I can accept that. Even if I mark you by accident, it's not a big deal. At least I won't be so irritable anymore and hurt Bennett when I lose control." The Omega curled up obediently in his arms, nodding softly. Eyes full of admiration, he pressed his nose close to breathe in Cameron's scent. "I'll listen to whatever you say, big brother." 2. Everyone around them laughed and joked. "That obedient? You're his fated match. Cameron's gonna get addicted, no way a beta can compete with that. You can afford to act a little spoiled. Good thing his wife's a beta. Even if Cameron marks Dominic, he won't know. Once marked, Cameron's pheromones will only be detectable by his Omega anyway. But what if he finds out? Someone asked. Cameron picked up another wine glass, slowly swirling it. He smiled, a smile with a sharp edge. Then I'll deal with it however you want me to. The room suddenly fell silent. The air turned heavy. Soft ambient music played in the background. The Omega nervously pinched Cameron's fingers. I'm a little scared, big brother. Cameron chuckled and tapped his nose. Took a sip of wine, then bent down and kissed it into the Omega's lips. You're this timid, and still dared to mess with me. The crowd laughed again. The alpha who once told me I was the only one he'd ever love was now kissing a boy 10 years younger, lips tasting of wine. I was just a beta. I didn't understand destiny, and I had no intention of fighting for it. My fingers trembled as I reached into my pocket and pulled out a blister pack of pills. The label read, "Not for sale." I clenched it tighter and tighter. The sharp edge dug into my palm. But I felt no pain. Just like how I'd come here. Quiet and unnoticed. I turned and left the same way. As I passed a trash can, I raised my hand. And tossed the pills in. 3. Cameron stayed out for the full 3 days. But he didn't forget to contact me. He sent me a voice call. Even through the phone, I could hear his uneven breathing, heavy and unsteady. Just like he always sounded when he was enduring his rut. No matter how uncomfortable he got, he'd always video call me during his lucid hours. Ask me what I'd been up to, what I ate, how I was feeling, if I missed him. This time, though, it wasn't a video call. Just audio. I tapped to switch it to video chat. Waited for a long while before Cameron finally picked up. He was lying in bed, propped up against a stack of pillows. Dressed in a robe, soaked in sweat. His forehead was veined, eyes bloodshot. Clearly in pain, yet still looking straight at me, calm and composed. Baby, did you miss me? I missed you too. Just a little longer, I'll be home tonight. I looked at him on that little screen, from his eyes down to the corners of the frame. Cameron himself wasn't moving. But the edge of the blanket in the lower left was trembling slightly. Tiny movements. Quick. I closed my eyes, forcing back my emotions. Curled my lips numbly. You don't look as miserable as usual. I was giving him a chance. Giving myself a chance. Hoping for honesty, so we could end this with dignity. Is your rut milder this time? Cameron paused only briefly before coming up with an excuse. I switched to a stronger suppressant. It helps a bit. I wasn't even disappointed. Just cold. Still, I asked, then why didn't you come home? I could have helped you. I'd said this so many times before. But Cameron always insisted I didn't understand how terrifying a rut could be for an alpha. He didn't want to hurt me. He never let me near him during that time. Video calls are one thing, he once said. But if you were right in front of me, I'd probably eat you alive. But now, he was clearly better. And still, didn't want to come back. Baby, I'm not fully recovered. If I catch your scent, I'll lose control. I'm a beta. I don't have a scent, I replied blandly. But I swear, you smell amazing to me, completely intoxicating. He looked at me with a smile, coaxing, be good, okay? I'll be home tonight. I'll bring you a gift to make it up to you. Can't believe I left my darling baby all alone. I really wasn't happy. But I let him misunderstand. Ended the call. I stared out the window at the garden. It was blooming with red and blue forget-me-nots. They were the same kind. Just some were still red, not yet turned blue. We had planted those together when we got married. We both loved their meaning, eternal love. Looking at them now. There's no such thing as a flower that never wilts. No such thing as love that lasts forever. Maybe it was time I left too. Made space for someone else. 4. The clinic texted me. Reminded me about my next checkup and experimental medication appointment. It was scheduled for the day after tomorrow. I thought it over. Then agreed. I hadn't taken the meds, but I still needed the exams. Cameron is a top-tier alpha. For 10 years, he stayed loyal to a beta like me. He had no heir for the family legacy. I felt guilty. But I couldn't stand the thought of him having a child with someone else. So since the end of last year, I'd been trying everything I could. I had an alpha friend who worked at a gender differentiation research center. I asked her tons of questions. Was it really impossible for a beta to get pregnant? What would it take to make it happen? She told me the center had been developing a conversion drug. And it had already reached clinical trials. Might take a few more years before it hit the market. The treatment cycle alone would take 1 or 2 years. She asked if I could wait. I couldn't. I was desperate to have a child with Cameron. So I volunteered to take the drug. It had already been 6 months. Lately, I'd started to pick up faint scents. Sometimes the back of my neck would feel hot and itchy. Even my body felt like it was changing. Like dormant glands and atrophied reproductive structures were slowly awakening. Getting ready to bloom. Before I found out Cameron had cheated, I'd been genuinely happy about these little changes every day. But now, it all stops here. He doesn't need to keep trying. And I don't need to keep transforming. We'll both go back to where we belong. He can live his life at the top. And I'll live my ordinary, unremarkable one. 5. Cameron came home before 6. He was holding a beautifully wrapped bouquet of forget-me-nots. And a full set of blue and white porcelain teaware. I recognized it as a recently unearthed antique set from the news. Back then, the pieces were still covered in dirt. Worn by time. I loved porcelain and had casually told Cameron once. Even dusty, this set is stunning. Cameron had only smiled in silence. And today, he presented it to me with pride. Beaming like a kid showing off a trophy. Your husband's pretty amazing, huh? He tapped his finger on the corner of his lips. Baby, aren't you gonna reward me? I looked at his flushed lips. And suddenly, all I could see was that same mouth. Last night, stained with red wine. I felt like throwing up. I turned quickly, placing the teaware on the coffee table. We've been married so long, no need for all this drama. It's time to eat. Maybe because he was already fully satisfied. Cameron didn't insist. He casually set the flowers in the most prominent spot. Then came over and wrapped his arms around my waist. How'd you know I didn't eat? He lowered his head, brushing a soft kiss on the back of my neck. Baby, I skipped work just to rush home and eat with you. He made it sound like such a sacrifice. But I couldn't bring myself to be moved. I lowered my head and gave a bitter smile. Is that so? Must have been tough. The table was full of delicacies. But I couldn't taste a single thing. 6. In the days after his rut, Cameron was always busy. The company had piled up with work waiting for him. He got up early every morning, and I'd get up with him. It was our routine. I'd tie his tie and see him out the door. I didn't have a job. Ever since Cameron took control of the company, he wouldn't let me work anymore. I used to be a ceramic artist. We didn't have money when I was little, so I only finished high school. I learned the craft from an old master deep in an alley. The first time I brought home a handmade clay pot, Cameron smashed it. By accident, when he bumped into me. Before I could get mad, he collapsed right on top of me. Looked just like a con artist trying to fake an injury. The pot broke. And I got a major headache in return. He was an illegitimate son, caught up in a brutal power struggle. Cold and aggressive. He crashed at my tiny rental for 3 whole years. Ate my food, drank my drinks, and constantly flirted with me. Said I saved him, and since he couldn't repay me with money, he'd pay with his body. I didn't believe him, but I didn't say no either. He was way too attractive, and those muscles felt amazing to touch. I was completely blinded by his looks. Let's be real, how many betas ever get to sleep with an alpha that hot? That alone could fuel my bragging rights for life. Then one day, his enemies found him. I took a bullet for him, injured my right hand. Ever since, I couldn't stop my hand from shaking when shaping clay. The ceramics I made were never perfect again. Cameron watched me struggle, then broke down crying, holding me tight. Said, "I'm sorry. I ruined your dream." When he finally rose to power, he showed up with a bouquet of forget-me-nots and proposed. Told me he was offering himself to me. It felt like the heavens had dropped a giant pie right on my head. I was in a daze when we got married. In a daze when I moved into the mansion. Did nothing, but felt like I'd won at life. And just like that, I spent 7 years with Cameron. Until I suddenly realized. Human desire never stops growing. I had love, marriage, money, leisure. Yet I still longed for a love that never changed. Too greedy. I forgot who I was. Snapping out of that dream, I numbly helped Cameron pick out his tie for the day. Just like always, I carefully tied it for him. The color didn't match his suit well today. But he didn't notice. He bent down and hugged me. "I'm heading to work. Wait for me." I gently pushed him away. "Safe trip." I didn't say, "I'll be waiting at home." Because I wouldn't be. Not anymore. 7. The next day, I went to the differentiation center. They took a few vials of blood, and I did a gland and abdominal ultrasound. Gavin said I was doing well. The blood test even showed trace amounts of pheromones. Soon, I'd be able to consistently perceive scents. She asked if I'd noticed anything recently. I nodded. She smiled as she pointed to a clearly developed sac on the ultrasound. "This area's already showing some growth. Give it less than a year, and you'll be able to start preparing for pregnancy." I looked at the screen quietly. I couldn't even remember the excitement and hope I felt just days ago. I smiled lightly. "No need. I've already thrown out the conversion meds." Gavin looked confused, but she didn't get upset. She calmly set the test results on the desk and asked hesitantly, "Why did you stop so suddenly?" I reminded you, the conversion process is irreversible. Even if you stop the meds now, the changes you've already experienced won't go away. You won't continue to differentiate, but you also can't go back to how you were. Of course I knew. Gavin had warned me countless times at the start of the trial. Back then, all I wanted was to have a child and spend my life with Cameron. I didn't consider anything else. But life is unpredictable. Even the partner you trust the most can turn into a complete stranger in a single moment. I opened my mouth, then quietly said, "My partner met his fated Omega." Gavin froze for a second. Then let out a long sigh. Even though I want to say that alpha-omega attraction is innate, and fated bonds are rare and powerful, that still doesn't make what your husband did right. She picked up her pen and scribbled in the trial notebook. Next to my name, she wrote in red, "Trial terminated. Luckily, you caught it in time. Bennett, go live for yourself." Believe it or not, betas are actually freer than alphas and omegas. I stood up and sincerely thanked and apologized to her. The trial was free, I gave her data, and she gave me everything I needed. Since I ended the trial on my own, I owed her that apology. 8. I didn't have many friends, Gavin was one of the few. She was my classmate in high school. We bumped into each other at a ceramics exhibition. She was also the only friend I invited to my wedding. After marrying Cameron, high society omegas looked down on me. Alphas all wanted to cozy up to Cameron, so they stayed away from me. Betas were respectful, always looking at me with envy. Cameron said that was good. This way, I could focus all my attention on him. My entire world seemed to shrink down to just Cameron. And now that he was gone from it, all I had left was myself. Before I knew it, I'd walked back to the alley where I first met Cameron. It had changed completely. The pottery studio was gone, replaced by a quiet, elegant bar. The sun was setting, and the bar was already buzzing with noise. I had no intention of drinking away my feelings. Ignored the wave of nostalgia and turned to leave. Just then, a young man in a server uniform burst out of the bar. His cheeks were flushed, his breathing heavy. The second he bumped into me, a strong, overwhelming peach scent rushed up my nose. He staggered as he ran, disappearing around the corner. Moments later, a group of drunk blonde alphas stumbled out, cursing loudly. Damn, that little O can run. Almost had him. No worries. He took a heat-inducing dose. Legs like jelly, won't get far. One of them tilted his chin at me. Hey, did you see an Omega? Which way'd he go? Another got real close, sniffing around. You a beta or an Omega? You kinda smell nice. My heart clenched. I pointed to the left. That way. After confirming I didn't emit any pheromones, they took off down the path I'd pointed. I patted my chest, still shaken, and finally understood what Gavin meant when she said, betas are the freest of all. 9. Worried, I followed the peach-scented Omega down the alley. Near the end, I suddenly realized this sweet, cloying scent was oddly familiar. Though I'd only smelled it once before, it left a deep impression. I stopped at the corner, listening. Urgent footsteps approached the Omega. The Omega collapsed into someone's arms, crying softly. Brother Cameron, I was triggered into heat. Please help me, please, boo-hoo. Cameron's tone was angry. Didn't I tell you to quit that damn job? Is entertaining clients really that good? The Omega sobbed pitifully, words broken. I don't want your money. I have pride too. I can make my own money, I'm not a hostess. Cameron ground his teeth, footsteps heavier. Then why are you with me? I lowered my head, hesitated, then quietly turned on my phone camera and recorded. Still uneasy, I peeked at their backs. Cameron held the Omega close, walking fast and heavily. The Omega raised their head from his chest, eyes glazed, and kissed Cameron messily. Lovingly, they whispered, I like you, brother. I really like you. Cameron paused at the corner, shifting the Omega to rest against his waist, back against the wall. He pinched their chin and kissed hard. You foolish, pitiful little thing. Their lips and tongues tangled, wet sounds audible. I hid in the shadows, staring blankly at the video on my phone. Tap. Raindrops fell on the screen. 1, 2 drops. Blurring the image. I looked up. Clear skies. It was my eyes that were raining. I smelled Cameron's pheromone. That familiar scent. The garden outside was full of that floral fragrance. No wonder when I said I liked forget-me-nots, Cameron smiled like a cat caught stealing fish. When I asked why he was smiling, he said nothing. Just kissed me fiercely, saying I had good taste. No wonder when he proposed, he gave me a bouquet of forget-me-nots and said he was offering himself to me. I once brewed forget-me-not tea. It was a little bitter, but left a sweet aftertaste. Unlike its flower's scent, which was bitter and astringent on my tongue. 10. On the way home, Cameron called. His voice was low, full of apology. Baby, too much work piled up. I have to work late tonight. I'll rest in the company lounge. You eat well, don't wait up for me. When I'm done, I'll spend time with you properly. I tugged my lips and whispered okay. Better that he didn't come home. Pretending to be normal was exhausting. I knew I should be carefree, leave without a backward glance. But I was just an ordinary person. I could only detach bit by bit. I sold off the luxury goods and antique porcelain Cameron gave me. So much money, never seen that much in my life. Cameron gave me his bank card to use freely. But I was frugal by nature, didn't know how to spend such big sums. Only now do I regret it. I'm not noble enough to walk away with nothing after 7 years with Cameron. My youth may be worthless. But it's not worthless at all. I transferred nearly 10 million to Gavin. She called me. I explained, half's for previous trial fees, half you can pay me back later. Gavin knew I was preparing for the future. She said nothing more. 11. The Omega's heat cycle lasted about as long as Cameron's rut. He came back 3 days later. Wearing a suit I hadn't seen before, his tie slightly crooked. He carried a gift box. A Vacheron Constantin watch. He shoved the box into my hands and hugged me close. Tiredly, he said, I missed you so much. Worked 3 days straight, I'm exhausted. Need you to recharge me. I closed my eyes, feeling a prickling pain in my heart. How calm must he be, to come straight from an Omega's bed and still embrace me without hesitation? Is that a natural alpha trait? I didn't know. So I pretended not to notice, pulling away from the warm but prickly hold. If you're tired, rest early. Cameron loosened his tie, displeased. It's been so long since we were intimate. Don't you miss me? I paused, then smiled faintly as I took off his jacket. Want me to help you shower? He smiled back, then suddenly stopped, teasing as he brushed my nose. Never mind, your husband's too tired. Need to rest well. In a few days, I promised to feed my little glutton properly. I watched his fingers trail down, biting my lip. Tired? Clearly, his body bore many scratches from stray cats. Seeing my displeasure, Cameron coaxed me. There's a ceramics art exhibition in a few days. I got 2 invites. I'll take you. I forced a smile, unenthusiastic. Are you free? I can go alone. He hooked my finger, pulling me onto the sofa. Of course I'm free. Otherwise, why work so hard? To make time for my baby, of course. I looked at him silently, wanting to ask if he really believed his own lies. But it would be pointless. Only cause arguments. Suddenly, I said, Cameron, do you know what I hate most? He laughed, lifted my hand, and kissed my palm. It can't be me. I smiled, carefully enunciating. I hate liars the most. He thought I was forcing him to accompany me. Kindly said, I'm not lying, I really will go with you. He raised his hand, swore. Anyone who lies to you is a dog. Such empty promises. God must hear that 1,000 times a day. No time to punish every liar. I pulled my hand away and pushed him gently. Go rest now. 12. For several days, I didn't smell Cameron's pheromones. I wasn't sure if it was the strong forget-me-not scent masking it, or if my nose was just off those days. On the day of the exhibition, I finally understood why. The event was full of alphas and omegas. I caught hidden, chaotic pheromones swirling around my nose, lingering. None of them smelled like peach or forget-me-not's soft fragrance. Cameron had indeed put work aside to come with me. And there I saw that Omega again. He wore a work ID around his neck. The name Dominic was printed large. His short hair was neat, his round eyes innocent. When he bowed his head, the mark on his neck showed clearly. A perfect circle of bite marks. Though I'm not an Omega, I know enough basic facts. He was permanently marked. That's why he had no scent, and wasn't afraid to stay where alphas gathered. Nor did he fear suddenly going into heat and disturbing the exhibition. Cameron paused when he saw him, but quickly recovered and walked through the exhibition with me. Halfway through, he said he needed to use the restroom. I followed instinctively but kept my distance, watching as he pulled Dominic into a corner. He scolded him. Put away your little schemes. Don't think that just because I marked you, you can act recklessly. If Bennett finds out, even if you're my destined Omega, I can make you wash off that mark. Dominic looked hurt and innocent. Our school organized volunteers, and we get credit for it. I didn't know you would come. He choked up, wiping tears. You never told me anything. Why do you always suspect me like that? He pushed Cameron away and ran out, brushing past me. Cameron stayed frozen for a moment, took a deep breath, then turned and walked out. He met my eyes and froze, a little flustered. Baby, when did you get here? I shrugged and gave up pretending. I nodded toward where Dominic had run. Not going after him. Cameron grew anxious. Let me explain, we work in the same place. I waved him off, cutting him off. It's okay, I understand. He stared, confused. You understand? I thought for a moment and put on my most loving expression. With a bitter smile. You want a child. I can't have one. So I have to accept you having a child with an Omega. Cameron looked at me carefully, a half smile on his face. You really think that? What am I then? Can I just give my heart to anyone? I'm nothing to him. He was angry. I didn't see what right he had to be. Ignoring his tantrum, I patted his shoulder. Half the exhibition is still left. I'm leaving first. He stood there, unmoving for a long time. 14. On the 6th night after discovering Cameron's affair, he and I were in a cold war. That whole day, he said only one sentence. When you admit your mistake, I'll come back to bed. I was carefree and happily sent him off. That same night, I drafted the divorce papers. On the 7th day, a message came from an unknown number. When I arrived at the cafe, Dominic was already there. He was calm, mature. I heard you can accept my presence. He sipped his coffee, raised his chin, and smiled at me. You don't need to retreat. You're just an ordinary beta, and I'm his destined Omega. You've only enjoyed the benefits of being born 10 years earlier, occupying my alpha for a decade. Even if you resist, he'll come back to me sooner or later. I said nothing. At first, I really thought he was helpless, a poor child trapped by his instincts. At least he never flaunted himself in front of me. Now I see, it's not unwillingness, but disdain. Because I'm not worthy. I picked up my coffee, it was hot. Hesitating a few seconds, I wondered whether to throw it at him or drink it. In the end, I placed it on the table. Stood up, and slapped him twice. Messing with someone else's marriage is low. Doing disgusting things and still parading it in front of me is just shameless beyond measure. Dominic finally lost his calm and his eyes reddened. I turned and walked away. Wish you two scoundrels a lifetime of misery together. 15. I wasn't sure if Dominic would snitch to Cameron. Didn't matter. After going home, I packed lightly. Only took my ID, leaving everything else behind. I dug up the forget-me-nots in the backyard and buried them in the soil. On the living room coffee table, I left a USB drive and a copy of the divorce agreement. I took a red-eye flight, then switched to a bus, then a motorcycle. Back to Qingyun Mountain, where I was born and raised. There were hardly any alphas or omegas here. No family either. But the old house they left me hadn't fallen apart. Just overgrown with moss and mold. I cleaned for 3 days before the house felt a little alive again. 16. When Dominic showed up in front of Cameron with a swollen, red face, Cameron felt a secret thrill. He thought Bennett was just all talk, but really cared deeply. He deserved it. Cameron had spent so much effort fighting his instincts to love Bennett. For 10 whole years. He rejected countless Omegas for Bennett's sake. So why could Bennett accept Cameron being with Dominic? That meant Bennett didn't care about him. He couldn't accept it. He threw a tantrum. See? Just one day and Bennett already couldn't stand it. Ignoring Dominic's face, Cameron hummed as he carried forget-me-nots home. The house was empty and quiet. That morning, he and Bennett were in a cold war, but Bennett still tied his tie for him. And told him, safe travels. He put the forget-me-nots in the antique vase he had given Bennett. Then called Bennett. He had no friends and nowhere else to go. Probably at the mall looking at ceramics again. But Bennett didn't answer. After 3 calls, Cameron noticed something on the coffee table. Seeing the divorce agreement, he panicked. He didn't check the USB but rushed upstairs. Bennett's clothes and belongings were all there. Not a thing missing. He breathed a sigh of relief. He thought Bennett was just angry and could be soothed. He was easy to please. And had nowhere else to go. Until he plugged in the USB and heard an audio clip. It was his own voice, at the club rooftop, talking to friends. Then a video. He was picking up Dominic, who was forcibly put into heat and under pheromones' influence, kissed him uncontrollably. Finally, a text appeared. Cameron, I can accept you being with others because I plan to step back. I told you before, I hate liars the most. You always say you fight your instincts to love me, but maybe that means, you instinctively don't love me. Sign the divorce papers and give us all some dignity. And lastly, I hate forget-me-nots. Cameron's eyes reddened. No, that wasn't true. He loved Bennett. Loved his gentle eyes. Loved his pure smile. Loved his calmness while making pottery. Loved his bravery blocking bullets for him. But he was an alpha, and during his sensitive period, he met his destined Omega. In that moment, his mind exploded like fireworks, dizzy and overwhelmed, full of thoughts of uniting with his Omega. It was an instinct no alpha could resist. He had no choice. He didn't want to make mistakes. Otherwise, he would have already made them, right? Cameron called everyone who might know Bennett. But found that except for Gavin, no one was connected to Bennett. He went to the differentiation center to find Gavin. Gavin was also an alpha, she would understand him. But she only glanced at him and handed him the trial records and medical reports. She said, when he was trying hard to conceive for you, you chose to have the Omega bear your child. He did sense your pheromones a few times, but only once or twice. I don't know where he went, other than changing his constitution, he never contacted me. Looking at the ultrasound showing a more visible gestational sac, Cameron choked up. If only he had waited a bit longer. Then he and Bennett might have had a child. When he returned home, Cameron suddenly realized the flowers in the backyard were gone. That old pot glittering with golden powder, left empty for a long time, was broken again. The scentless flowers he hid in the villa were completely missing. 17. A week later, I left the mountain. The mountain was peaceful and the air was good. I could make ceramics here but not fire them. Firing ceramics requires a high-temperature kiln. I worried about accidentally setting the mountain on fire. And I needed a new pottery wheel. The one my family left was outdated. I tried making pottery by hand but was too clumsy. With my injured hand holding me back, I couldn't shape good clay pieces. An old man in the village said he was going to town to get supplies and offered me a free ride. I rode a bumpy 3-wheeled vehicle to the city. After buying everything, I had it sent back to the mountain. I visited every pottery shop and asked if there were any kilns locally. I searched until dusk, then finally found one. A young man owned the shop, tucked deep in an old alley. His kiln was out in the suburbs. He warmly took me to see it, flashing cute little crooked teeth. He said I could use it for free. No one young is really interested in this anymore. I'm just happy to have someone to share the joy of waiting for ceramics to come out of the kiln. His words made him sound like a middle-aged man. I laughed, but you're still young. In a few weeks, I fired 3 ugly batches. Kellen and I laughed with dusty hands. Sorry, it's been a while. No worries, good things take time. I rolled my wrist and planned to take the imperfect ceramics back to the villagers. They wouldn't be picky and would praise my skills. My phone rang. It was Cameron. He called often, but signal was bad in the mountains, so I usually missed him. When I answered, he'd only ask when I'd be home or say he wanted to come see me. I told him I was already home and to leave me alone except for the divorce. Today, his voice was hoarse. I'm divorced. Come home. 18. Kellen heard I was going to the city center to file for divorce and kindly offered to drive me. I tried to refuse. He said, "Don't feel pressured. I'm preparing for a solo exhibition nearby anyway, just on the way." He took me to the marriage center. Waiting outside, he smiled and said, "Since you're here, want to see my exhibition too?" I couldn't say no. Cameron was waiting for me at the entrance. He had lost a lot of weight, his eye sockets hollowed, and his expression was heavy. He asked, "Was that an alpha?" I didn't know, I didn't smell any pheromones. I had no obligation to answer him. "It's none of your business. Let's go, end this properly." Cameron grabbed my wrist. He kissed the scar there painfully. "Can we not end it? Dominic and I both erased our marks, you can re-smell my pheromones. Only for you." Suddenly his pheromones spread, surrounding me. I shook off his hand and slapped his face. Stepping back a few paces, I covered my nose and said coldly, "Sorry, I'm not used to pheromones, they're too pungent. I told you, I hate liars. If this is another lie, I'll take legal action." Cameron looked at me in disbelief, not turning away for a long time. Seemingly unable to believe I hit him. His lips trembled. As a last resort, he said, "Can we still be friends? Let's start over. You can use me. You love ceramics, I'll organize solo exhibitions for you for life." I suddenly remembered the first pottery jar I made. It wasn't especially pretty, but it was my favorite. Even when it broke, I picked up the pieces and tried to fix it. Glued it together. At the time, Cameron was disdainful but helped patch up the gold powder. The ugly jar's surface twisted with shiny gold lines. Anyone could tell it had been broken before. Neither pretty nor practical. "Cameron, do you remember when we first met and you broke my pottery jar? Later, I used it to hold the flowers you gave me. Flowers always wilt quickly. Later, I realized, when neither of us noticed, the water in the jar leaked out. Without roots, the flowers withered from lack of water. A broken jar can't hold water no matter how much you fix it. Insincere people, no matter how much they regret, can't wash away the stains. I don't want the jar, the flowers, or you anymore." Cameron's face went pale instantly. "Even if I fix the jar again?" He excitedly pulled out his phone and showed me a video of him repairing the jar. I glanced at it, then looked away. "Can it really be fixed?" I asked coldly. Cameron was speechless. He mechanically went with me to complete the paperwork. The clerk was used to this kind of thing. "Another AB couple. You're the ones who get divorced the most. Why stay together at all?" Cameron shouted at him to shut up. The clerk was scared and worked twice as fast. Handed us the divorce certificate. 19. Cameron looked like a statue watching me leave. I didn't linger, just slammed the car door and left. Since I was there anyway, I took time to meet Gavin for tea and invited her to the exhibition. Gavin declined, laughing that she wasn't as artsy as me and was busy with experiments. She returned the money and wished me freedom. 3 days later, a lot of money appeared in my bank account. Transferred by Cameron. I wasn't too proud to refuse it. I immediately donated it to the village chief to fix the roads. A week later, I followed Kellen to his solo exhibition. I learned he was the famous pottery master Jasper. This was what my old pottery teacher had told me. Back then, Jasper was still a university student, always coming and going in a hurry. I'd seen him a few times but never interacted much. When Cameron appeared, he took up my attention. I never got to know this talented young man. "Kellen, you're really low-key." Kellen chuckled, nothing to show off. He suddenly said, "When I saw you, I knew you were my senior apprentice. Our master said your hand was injured and thought you'd never do pottery again." I smiled and shook my head, looking carefully at the colorful, uniquely shaped ceramics in the booth. Life doesn't have to be perfect, and neither does pottery. Art isn't so harsh. Suddenly, a quarrel broke out somewhere at the exhibition. As the organizer, Kellen went over naturally. I followed. At the entrance, Dominic was in work clothes, being dragged out by Cameron. Who let you show up here? Get lost. Dominic was angry and wronged, tears streaming. My mentor recommended me. What's it to you? This isn't your exhibition, why kick me out? Kellen glanced at me, then stepped forward. Sorry, this is my exhibition. Please don't make a scene. Cameron saw me behind Kellen, let go of Dominic, and stared at me blankly. Murmured, I knew you'd come. He sadly pointed at Kellen, you came with him? Full of resentment and condescension. He's just a beta, no matter how promising, he's no match for me. I suddenly smiled, so that's what you think. But I'm just a beta, too. Cameron panicked and explained, that's not what I meant. You're different. Bennett, you're different. How am I different? Just because I saved him? It's the same, Cameron. Anyone else, I would have saved, too. In that alley, I wanted to save Dominic, not catch you cheating. It just happened I found out he didn't need saving. Both Dominic and Cameron were stunned. I looked up and said to Kellen, you handle this, I'll keep looking at the exhibition. Kellen nodded, and I turned away. That was the last time I saw Cameron. From then on, we parted ways peacefully, each free to be happy.